Well, that's freshman New York Democrat Congressman Mondaire Jones, the first member of Congress to publicly call on Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer to retire. You know, Justice Breyer was nominated by President Clinton back in 1994. He's 82 years old. The thinking would be to have President Biden replace him with a like-minded justice so a Republican president can't. This amid the calls to expand the court from 9 to 13 justices from Democrats. For more on this, Phil Wegmann's here, White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. So, Phil, let's start with Justice Breyer. I mean, is Jones's demand, is that a call in the wilderness, or is there real pressure in Washington on Breyer to turn in his robes?
Certainly, I think that you cannot divorce the conversation about expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court from what we just heard from the representative. If you want to convince one of the Supreme Court justices to head for the exit, what's the best way to move them in that direction? To start having a conversation about packing the court, about adding justices, about diluting their power as a result. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming weeks and months. I think that the Representative Jones there, he's just being honest. I think that he's ahead of the curve and willing to have a frank conversation publicly that is currently happening behind closed doors privately.
Yeah, but this is a job for life. You know, you have tenure for life. You don't have to step down if you don't want to.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that this is why there's this disconnect between the expectations of the Supreme Court justices, who have worked very hard to appear not political, to appear not involved in the day-to-day red versus blue, and then some of these questions of decorum. You know, both Republicans and Democrats, they never want to give the impression that they are only nominating someone because of the way that they will vote. But, you know, we heard it in that clip. Democrats feel like they got burned towards the end of the Obama years. They love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They still revere her even today, but they hated her timing, and they think that because she remained on the court, you know, because it is a lifetime position, that she essentially, you know, allowed her seat to be filled by one of President Trump's picks. So Democrats, it's a difficult conversation, but I think that, you know, they seem to be willing to have it.
Yeah, you know, the Democrats are accusing President Trump of packing the court and Mitch McConnell because they say that they speed past Amy Coney Barrett, you know, right on the eve of the election when McConnell blocked Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, for so long. It's been a mixed bag, though. And critics have said, even though she's revered and iconic, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg should have retired. So President Obama could have slotted a liberal justice in. But let's take a look. Stevens was replaced, Justice Stevens, by Elena Kagan. Anthony Kennedy by Kavanaugh. Justice Souter by Sotomayor. So it's not always a guarantee that you may get a like-minded person. On the short list, would Merrick Garland be on President Biden's short list potentially if Breyer hears these whispers and decided to step down?
Well, I think that Garland possibly could be. Obviously, over at the Department of Justice, he's becoming more political as that role requires. But I think what's really interesting about this is that if you look back at President Trump, one of the areas where he was very careful and he did not want to rock the boat was Supreme Court justices. And I think we see something slightly similar here when it comes to the court packing question. Earlier this week when she was asked about it, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki sort of deferred. She said, look, we're going to wait for this presidential commission on judicial reform to come out before Biden is going to say one way or the other if he would support adding more justices. But, everything that was old is new again. Remember, back during the campaign, you had a lot of folks on the right calling on Biden to release his short list for people that he would nominate. And I think that, basically what we're seeing right now is that everyone is getting ready for some type of battle in the next 3 years if confirmation comes again.
Yeah, could this all be, in the background of this is the commission. So does Breyer take any of that into consideration? What do you think his thinking is, right now in terms of potentially stepping down or not? You got to think, does he think politically or does he think, in terms of independent judicial process?
Yeah, so from the folks that I've talked to who are adjacent and sort of, run in similar circles as some of his former clerks, the expectation is that he is very opposed to court packing. We saw Ruth Bader Ginsburg also voice her opposition to this because the Supreme Court, of course, prides itself on being an institution which is above politics. But you've got to think that these justices, they read newspapers, they pay attention to politics just like everyone else. I think that, they are not immune from this type of pressure. And I think that, we might see, some movement, some signals perhaps through, their former clerks. It's going to be interesting no matter what happens.
Yeah, and obviously if he takes that position, he would likely not want to retire. But finally, Utah law study has a fascinating study. It says that there's no guarantee if you swap someone on the bench to get them in there that they'll be exactly like the person you're replacing. Here's what they say, quote, "Some justices have openly voiced political goals for retirement or regretted retirement to ideologically incompatible presidents. The leading anecdotal account claims that partisanship currently dominates the departure process, and justices who time their retirements politically had limited success in obtaining like-minded replacements." So if you were a betting man, Phil, what would you bet Breyer's going to do?
I think the safe bet here is actually not to say whether he's going to step down or stay. I think the safer bet here is that there's something to that Republican joke about packing courts, whether or not that's actually infrastructure. Because the truth here is the fact that we're having this conversation is actually something that Republicans are going to benefit from, because this is something that they can use to get their base to come out in 2022. You have groups like the Judicial Crisis Network who are already fundraising, who are already mobilizing on this issue. And this whole conversation, when the politics are in flux, might actually end up helping conservatives and Republicans, not Democrats who are pushing to get their preferred replacement on the court.
Yeah, I remember what happened with FDR back in '37. So Phil Wegmann, White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Phil, always good to see you. Thank you for your insight today.